Welcome back to So What Does That Mean? The podcast where we break down engineering, planning, and construction in plain English. I'm Brendan, the engineer.
And I'm Joanne, the non-engineer. If you're a developer, builder, homeowner, or just someone trying to make sense of the construction world, you're in the right place.
Every episode, we take a topic that costs people real money, real time, and real stress, and we unpack it so you actually understand what's going on, why it matters, and what you can do about it.
No jargon walls, no lectures, just practical, common sense advice from the people who see these problems every single day. So Brendan, today I want to talk about something that everyone in the industry keeps blaming for delays: the skills shortage. And you've got a pretty controversial take on this. You reckon the skills shortage is real, but it's being used as an excuse for something else entirely.
Yeah. And this is one of those topics where I genuinely see people lose tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars because nobody explained it to them up front. So let's get into it.
Okay, you've told me the skills shortage is real, but it's being used as an excuse. Let's see the receipts. What do the numbers actually say?
Let's start with the shortage itself because the numbers are absolutely real and they're significant. The construction industry has an annual exit rate of around 8%. That means roughly 1 in 12 workers leaves the industry every single year, and only about half of those are being replaced. So the workforce is actively shrinking year on year at a time when we desperately need it to grow.
And how big is the industry we're talking about?
Massive. As of June 2025, there were 452,937 active construction businesses in Australia. The industry employs about 1.35 million people. It accounts for more than 10% of GDP and turns over $384 billion a year. So we're not talking about a niche sector. This is one of the largest industries in the entire country. And it's losing workers faster than it can replace them.
And what's the pipeline of new workers? Is that helping at all?
Not fast enough. The federal government committed $90.6 million in 24-25 budget to increase skilled construction workers, fee-free TAFE, faster migrant skills assessments, that kind of thing. And look, that's welcome. But the industry needs those workers yesterday, not in 3 years when someone finishes their apprenticeship. And here's the part that really frustrates me. Female participation is still shockingly low. Only 12.7% of the total construction workforce are women, and in trades, the actual hands-on roles, it's just 2%. 2%. We've got half the population essentially untapped. The opportunity is sitting right there, but the industry hasn't done enough to make itself attractive or accessible to women. Long hours, poor work-life balance, outdated culture. These are fixable problems that the industry keeps talking about and not solving.
So the shortage is real and the solutions are slow, but you said the shortage isn't the main reason projects are late. So what is it?
Productivity. And this is where the numbers get really uncomfortable for a lot of people in the industry. The Productivity Commission has reported that dwelling construction productivity has been, and I'm quoting here, in the doldrums for at least 30 years. 30 years. This isn't a recent problem. It's a generational failure. And specifically, construction productivity in Australia has declined 6.8% over the 5-year period to 2022-2023. Not stagnated, not held steady, declined. We are getting less done with the workers we have than we were 5 years ago.
Less productive than 5 years ago. That is honestly hard to wrap your head around. How is that even possible with all the technology available now?
Because the technology isn't being adopted. The KPMG Global Construction Survey found that many Australian firms, particularly mid-tier contractors, still have fragmented delivery, siloed data, and limited technology adoption. And here's the number that should be on a billboard on every highway in the country. There is a potentially $56 billion annual productivity gap in Australian construction. 56 billion. That's the difference between what the industry produces and what it could produce if it simply matched the economy-wide productivity average, not world class, not best practice, just average.
$56 billion a year is being left on the table.
Every single year. And the reason it's being left on the table is rework. This is where it gets really confronting. An Australian multi-university study looked at 346 construction projects over 6 years. Across those projects, they recorded 19,600 rework events. 19,600 times something had to be torn out and done again. And the average cost of the rework, 39% of the original contract value.
I'm sorry, what? 39%? So on $1 million project, $390,000 is spent fixing things that should have been done right the first time.
That's what the study found. Now, I want to be fair. That's at the higher end. A separate national survey of 161 Australian construction professionals found more conservative numbers. The mean direct cost of rework was 6.4% of contract value, with an additional 5.9% in indirect costs. Things like delays, disruptions to other trades, management time spent resolving issues, so roughly 12% total. And the global industry data suggests that about 5% of total contract value goes to rework on average. But here's the stat that ties it all together. Rework contributes to an average of 52% of total cost growth on projects.
52% of cost growth. So more than half of every budget blowout is rework.
More than half. And it gets worse, because when you ask where that rework comes from, when you trace it back to its root cause, 70% of all rework in construction can be traced to engineering and design related matters. Not site errors, not tradespeople making mistakes, not material defects, design errors. Incomplete drawings, uncoordinated services, missing details, conflicting specifications, insufficient site investigation. The stuff that should have been sorted out before anyone picked up a hammer or started a machine.
So you're saying 7 out of 10 rework events start at the drawing board?
7 out of 10. And another Australian study from the ARBV, the Architects Registration Board of Victoria, found that design deficiencies account for almost 50% of all documented variation orders, rework, and cost overruns on building projects. Almost half of every variation, every cost blowout, every delay, traceable to the design phase. And a Singaporean study found that between 50 and 60% of building defects could be attributed to design issues or would have been preventable with better design. The numbers are consistent across multiple countries. Poor design documentation is the single biggest driver of waste, delay, and cost overrun in construction worldwide.
So when a builder tells you the project is running late because they can't find a tiler...
Yeah, maybe that's true. But the reason they need the tiler for an extra 3 weeks is probably because the waterproofing detail was wrong in the drawings, or the floor levels didn't match the hydraulic design, or the structural engineer and the architect didn't talk to each other. And now there's a beam where the plumbing was supposed to go, and everything has to be ripped out and redone. The tiler shortage didn't cause the delay. The bad documentation did. The tiler shortage just meant there was nobody available to come back and fix it quickly.
And here's where it gets really relevant to your argument, right? Because if you fix the documentation, you fix the rework, and suddenly the shortage matters a lot less.
Exactly. Think about it this way. If 30% of all work done on construction projects is rework, and some studies estimate it's that high, then almost a third of every trade hour on every site is being wasted doing things twice. If you eliminated even half of that rework through better design documentation and coordination, you'd effectively free up 15% more trade capacity without hiring a single additional person. In an industry that employs 1.35 million people, 15% is the equivalent of adding 200,000 workers. You wouldn't need a skills shortage solution. You'd have just solved it with better paperwork.
That is a huge number. 200,000 equivalent workers just from reducing rework.
And the building inspection data backs it up from the other end. One building inspector in Melbourne, who's inspected thousands of new homes, was asked if he could show a video of a house that's actually fully compliant as an example of good work. His answer? Find one and I'll do the inspection for free. He said the percentage of new builds in Australia that are guaranteed non-compliant is 100%. Now that might sound extreme, and it is one person's view, but the research supports the general picture. In Victoria alone, housing defects cost nearly $1 billion per year. One house in 8 reports defects serious enough to trigger an insurance claim. The quality problem is systemic.
So let me run through these numbers because they are genuinely staggering. 8% annual exit rate, only half replaced. Only 2% of trades are women. Productivity down 6.8% in 5 years, and in the doldrums for 30 years. $56 billion productivity gap nationally. Rework averaging up to 39% of contract value on some studies, 12% on others. 70% of rework traced to design errors. Design deficiencies behind 50% of variations and cost overruns. And reducing rework by half would be the equivalent of adding 200,000 workers to the industry.
And the solution to the vast majority of it is better documentation, better coordination, and better engineering upfront, which is exactly what JCE is built to deliver. We can't fix the labour market. We can't magically produce more electricians or concreters, but we can make sure that every hour a tradesperson spends on your project is productive, because the documentation we're working from is complete, coordinated, and correct. That's how you actually beat the skills shortage. Not by finding more workers, by wasting fewer of the ones you've got. And every developer, every builder, every homeowner has the power to demand that from their consultants. Don't accept the cheapest engineering quote, accept the most thorough one. Because the money you save on a cheap engineer, you will spend 10 times over on rework, delays, and variations on site. We see it every single week.
Okay, so let's be fair first. The skills shortage is real, right? We're not saying it's made up.
It's absolutely real. The numbers don't lie. The industry has an annual exit rate of about 8%, and only half are being replaced. Higher skill shortages remain acute, especially in engineering, project management, and specialist trades. Female participation is still only around 12.7% of the total construction workforce, and only 2% in trades. The federal government has committed funding for fee-free TAFE and faster migrant skills assessments, but the pipeline takes years to fill. So yes, the labour constraint is genuine and significant.
So what's the controversial part then? If the shortage is real, why are you calling it a myth?
The myth isn't the shortage. The myth is that the shortage is the primary reason your project is late. In JC's experience, most project delays trace back to poor planning, incomplete documentation, late design changes, inadequate site investigation, and coordination failures. The skills shortage makes these problems worse, but it doesn't cause them. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If your documentation was complete, your approvals were in order, and your design was properly coordinated before you went to tender, you get your project built. Contractors prioritize projects that are ready to go. The projects that sit waiting for trades are usually the ones with incomplete plans, unresolved design issues, or outstanding approvals. Contractors don't want to touch them because they know they'll be standing around waiting.
That's a pretty big claim. You're basically saying the people complaining about the shortage are partly causing their own delays.
Not entirely, but significantly. And I know this sounds harsh, but the data supports it. Construction productivity in Australia has declined 6.8% over 5 years to 2022-2023. That's not a labour supply issue. That's an efficiency issue. The KPMG Global Construction Survey found that many Australian firms still have fragmented delivery, siloed data, and limited technology adoption, representing a potential $56 billion annually productivity gap. If we're using the workers we have more efficiently, through better documentation, better coordination, less rework, less waiting. We'd get more done with fewer people. JCE's philosophy: we can't fix the national labour market, but we can give our clients documentation that's complete, coordinated, and constructible, so their project is the one the contractors want to build.
So what specifically makes good documentation? What's the difference between a project that attracts contractors and one that doesn't?
Complete design, not we'll figure it out on site. Every retaining wall, every service connection, every stormwater detail resolved before tender. Proper site investigation. Geotech, survey, services search, flood assessment, no surprises. Coordinated disciplines. Civil, structural, hydraulic, electrical, all talking to each other so there are no clashes on site. Clear specifications. Contractors know exactly what's expected, so they can price accurately and build efficiently. Resolved approvals. Council conditions addressed, referral agency requirements met, compliance pathway clear. When a contractor gets a tender package like that, they can plan their program, lock in their subbies, and build with confidence. That project gets built on time.
And what about the builders and developers who are feeling this shortage acutely? What can they do right now?
Invest in documentation quality up front. It's the single highest return investment you can make in a construction project. Plan further ahead. 60% of builders expect more work in 2026. That means more competition for the same trades. Get your projects tender ready early. Build relationships with your consultants and contractors. The companies that treat their supply chain well get prioritized when capacity is tight. Stop treating engineering as a commodity purchase. The cheapest engineering often produces the documentation that causes the most delays. We spoke about this in episode 9.
And what about the builders and developers who are feeling this shortage acutely? What can they do right now?
Invest in documentation quality upfront. It's the single highest return investment you can make in a construction project. Plan further ahead. 60% of builders expect more work in 2026. That means more competition for the same trades. Get your projects tender ready early. Build relationships with your consultants and contractors. The companies that treat their supply chain well get prioritized when capacity is tight. Stop treating engineering as a commodity purchase. The cheapest engineering often produces the documentation that causes the most delays. We covered this in episode 9, why cheap engineering is the most expensive decision. The common sense message: you can't control how many workers there are in the market. You can control how ready your project is when those workers are available.
All right, so if people are listening to this and thinking, that sounds like me, what's the one thing they should do right now?
Pick up the phone, talk to a qualified engineer before you commit to anything. Not after, not when the problem shows up, before. That one conversation could save you more money than you believe.
And that's the JCE difference, right? You're not just ticking boxes. You're actually trying to help people avoid these traps.
That's exactly it. We've built a whole practice around giving people clear, practical, common sense advice before the problems start, not after.
Love it. All right, if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with anyone you know who's building, developing, or renovating. It might just save them a fortune.
And if you've got a question or a topic you want us to cover, drop us a message through our socials or hit us up through JCE. We read everything.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time.
See you on the next one.